The NFL stands for not for long.
Set, Sharga and Armstead. Roll out, Walker still running out. Looks to the left, wide open, Thompson touchdown. Colin Thompson with the touchdown. There was nobody within 20 yards of
What a catch off the bobble. Colin Thompson scoops it up.
Lofting corner, the end zone. It is caught for the touchdown. The first NFL touch for Colin Thompson is a score.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Colin Thompson Show. Really excited for you guys listening to something new we're doing here at Not For Long Media and the Colin Thompson Show. It's associating and involving Yoni Rosenblatt, a PT that I've been blessed to work with. I think he's one of the best I've ever been with. Certainly one of the best state of Maryland. He's in the Pennsylvania area, the Virginia area, the Delaware area, with true sports performance. Absolutely love working with him and his team up there. But more importantly, I think he has a wealth of knowledge of injuries, and I think it'd be fun to bring it to our followers, almost like our injury insider talking about, different players throughout the league, what they're going through with their injury, when they are slated to return, maybe the process that they're going to go through. So an inside perspective, something that he would do in rehab. This is what we're going to bring. Yoni and I did this episode really to kind of talk about the offseason injuries, talk about things ahead. No opinions from me. Just, hey, what do you think about this player and what their return is? So I find it fascinating. I think it'd be a really fun topic for us to dive into. Yoni's going to be doing it probably a weekly basis on my show. Hey, guy sprained an ankle last week. Is he going to be ready for next week? I know there's people that are in fantasy and all that type of stuff, sports. I think it'd be really cool to tune in and have that be associated with what we're doing. A little different twist on what we have going on here at Not For Long Media. And everything we have going on here at Not For Long Media is made possible by our friends at the original Fudge Kitchen. I just shipped 50 boxes to Texas for a business to sample because they are going to use possibly the original Fudge Kitchen for Christmas gifts for their entire employees and for everyone they do business with. So I think it's a really cool and fun way to mix things up. A nice letter is always good, and add some fudge with it. I think it has a unique perspective of, hey, it's not as serious, but we're kind of fun, and a little taste of the Jersey Shore is always good. A little saltwater taffy, all the great fudge flavors. I think the maple walnut's my favorite, but they have so many. Check them out, fudgekitchens.com, shipping fudge and sweet treats across the country. So I hope you guys enjoy Yoni. He gives a great perspective, and I really think that this could be something that could really grow. This segment with Yoni could really grow into something big with us. Stay tuned for something more from him, and you're going to see it all across our social media moving forward. So thanks for all your support. Shout out to the original Fudge Kitchen. Shout out to all our shows here at Not For Long Media. Check them out. We have something for everyone, and we appreciate your support. And here is Yoni Rosenblatt from True Sports Performance.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Colin Thompson Show, brought to you by the original Fudge Kitchen, fudgekitchens.com, shipping fudge and sweet treats across the country. A little special addition to the Colin Thompson Show this week. We have Yoni Rosenblatt back with us from True Sports Performance, the premier place to really rehab in the Delaware, Philly, Jersey, Maryland, Virginia area, many locations. Check out True Sports Performance. Yoni has been working on my body now for about a year, and it's been a great relationship. And I just thought, this would be a great way to get our fans engaged with some of the injuries in the NFL. Instead of, hey, 4 to 6 weeks, he's coming back. Let's deep dive what those 4 to 6 weeks would look like a little bit. Nothing crazy. We're not going to nerd it out, but we're going to touch on a few things. First off, Yoni, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing great, and I'm going to nerd it out.
I love it, man. Do what you want, because you know what? It's your world.
Appreciate it.
It's your world. First and foremost.
It's your show. It's your show.
Yeah, it is my show. Thank you. So Yoni will interject during the season a little bit with a couple different highlights, talk through things, quick to the point, but just help, our fans, our listeners dive deeper into a few things. Okay. First and foremost, training camp's on the way. Tons of injuries always come out of it, right? Some teams more than others. Some teams traditionally more than others. Some teams come out of nowhere and guys are rolling their ankles and That's just injury and that's just football. Long story short, Yoni, why during training camp is there a massive spike in injuries?
It has to do with the way guys are training. It's super different very often training camp versus the way they train off season. Think about a given workout. It really matters how well the strength coach or the performance coach, whoever they're working with, can mimic the conditions that they're going to see in training camp. So very often those rest breaks in training camp versus when you're kind of in Florida, just kind of getting back into things or trying to stay in shape, they might be different, right? You might have less rest, or it might be less predictable training versus in training camp. That's why you see guys now all of a sudden they're reacting to a pace that they're not used to. That's when things kind of start to go to hell. That could be one reason, as an example. Another thing is just sheer intensity level. It doesn't matter how hard you try to replicate the intensity of training camp to your training. When there's another grown man on the other side of a football and each of you are fighting for your job, that intensity is going to be totally heightened. Guys will push themselves past where they're necessarily used to. That's when hammies, calves, tendons start to go to hell because you're just not used to that level of intensity. And then you can probably speak, Kyle, more to this than I, but that is the other factors that go into a training camp that don't show up in training in the off season, right? So you're sitting in meetings for hours. Now that means a few things. One, less time to warm up, no time to cool down. Two, you're sitting at a hip flex position in a terrible posture. Maybe you're slumping, sitting in that seat for hours on end, and then bang, now you got to go out to the field and fight for your job, right? Your body might not be as ready, finely tuned as it is during off-season prep. Totally different in training camp. You got to be ready to go when that whistle blows. So that's why you start to see those injuries uptick. By and large, if I had to sum it up, it's an injury transpires if it's non-contact, meaning you're not being hit. It will transpire when the body is asked to do too much that it's not ready to handle. There are a lot of factors in training camp that make your body unable to handle a given load. That's when injuries occur. That's why they happen in training camp.
Great points, really. And that was the one thing I struggle with, Yoni, is the sitting part, because you go from training, bounding, running, lifting, getting ready for camp. You do some football movement stuff, which is you do your best to do by yourself or with a group of guys, but it's never the same running into somebody. But the long periods of time sitting, I know this may sound crazy to folks listening, like, oh, you're seriously complaining about sitting? But you're talking about sitting for 2, 3, 4 hour blocks, and then a dinner break, and then another 2-3 hours sitting. I would go and roll out, stretch, just try to make myself feel a little bit better, and right before bed every night and try to lay flat, maybe get in the pool and decompress the spine a little bit, because in the mornings usually when I have practice because it's so hot during training camp. I digress. Really good stuff from Yoni so far. Thanks so much for coming on. Okay, so for me, what would be some advice you would give to guys to get themselves ready for camp that's, not out of the ordinary per se, but better than your normal, go lift and run fast?
Well, let's think about it. Number one, it's periodization. So your training needs to look different in March, April than it does in May, June, right? You need to be periodizing and prepping and trying to ramp up appropriately. Two is, let's think about how do we recreate that which is training camp, if that's what you're training for. Too often we spend off-season training for week 4, 5, 6. Those are different than training camp. Train for the test, and the test is training camp in this instance. And so see how much you can mimic of being reactionary, because that's going to show up in training camp. Go against other dudes, getting yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone, because that's going to show up in training camp. Maybe you splice it into film sessions or seated sessions, let's say. And okay, how quickly can you ramp it up for training camp? And then also think about what transpires when you're on that field. And you did a great job of this, of bringing it out with Dan Brown last time, talking about his interplay with the coaches when they asked him to do something that's a little bit different, right? That's going to show up. Kyle, you and I talked about it when we were just kind of feeling each other out and you were learning how to decel and accel. The way I teach it is you'll have a coach come up to you and say, hey, Kyle, I need you to run this route like this. Well, maybe your body isn't ideally suited to do that again, injury ensues. How do you mimic that as much as you can mimic that in the offseason? Last but not least, on that point of how do we avoid those injuries, I had an awesome conversation with a linebacker yesterday morning. He left for camp yesterday afternoon. I said, what do you want to focus on this session? He said, I want to nail down what is my AM routine, what is my pre-practice routine warm-up, what is my cool down, what is my nighttime routine. And it was 3-4 exercises exactly scripted to what he thinks his schedule will be. If you can knock that out and understand it and know the moves appropriately, I think that sets you up for success. I hope.
It's really great stuff, Eddie. And again, creating those environments, creating those awkward moments. And I think there's a part of it where as a player, you just got to say F it and just roll it, because that's a part of it anyways. Like, back in the day, I hate to be that guy, but like, you just went out and you played. And it's not that far from difference. Yeah. And sometimes when your rhythm gets a little screwed up and your routine gets a little screwed up and maybe you ate too much or maybe you didn't eat enough or, the hot tub was a little bit more full and you couldn't get in pre-practice and maybe your hammies don't fit. You know what? That's football. It's just a part of the game. It's not golf where you're on the range for 3 hours before. It's practice. You may be rolling out there and you think you have individual drill to warm up and then special teams to warm up. No, the coach may put the ball down the 1 yard line and say it's live and you got to go. And that's what makes football different and us a little more nutty, a little crazier, as you can attest to my craziness.
I can definitely attest to that. Now, yeah, but Kyle, highlight what you talked about yesterday, because I thought that was a great point of what you were asking me, like, oh, am I going to be ready? Am I going to be ready? And you're like, man, some of this is just so mental. To figure out and tell yourself, I'm going to be fine. Whereas when it's so scripted, people get a little bit antsy when it's not following that exact script. Are you going to be okay? I thought those were great points by you.
It's really, there's a lot to unpack. I would say back to the script side of it. I stopped looking at the practice script last year. One of the first time in my career, I was just like, be in the moment, focus, and just go. So before I'd be like, okay, we have this period, that period. Every player is like, okay, that's not bad. We got 20. Oh, man, end of the practice, inside zone. You got this whole run period. You get this whole thing, whatever this most stressful period of the day would be for you. And it's debilitating mentally. Instead of just like, here I am. I've done all this before in my life a million times, and I'm still nervous about it. So it's fun. At the end of the day, there's a point of football, and like this in any sport, in any profession, call it a leap of faith, if you will, where you just got to say F it and you got to go and your pre-practice routine. And, because the coach may change it. The coach may say, hey, we got a 15-minute break, guys, and we're going to get a 2-hour meeting. And then you guys are done for the weekend. Well, you don't have your pre-practice routine in then. It's over. So that's football, man. That's football.
Well, I think it's football. I think it's life, but tell me more about that. How does it usually work? You get the whole like script for the day. When do you get that? What kind of detail is it? I don't know anything of that. I'm not in camp. Tell me what it's like in camp.
I love it. This is great. This is already being a better segment because we're off the rails. So, okay, so I'll just take you through a day in training camp. Let's just do that. Day in training camp. This is a little bit easier, right? Usually I like this what we did because you're always going to have a walkthrough and you're going to have a practice. That's going to happen. Now, a lot of teams will have practice first, walkthrough in the afternoon, make corrections, talk about the day ahead, gives you enough time for film, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is you start the day with walkthrough, say, all right, you walk through for an hour, 45 minutes offense, 15 minutes special teams, you're off the field. You had breakfast before it. And then you may have like a hour to get ready for practice. So that's it. Say that walkthroughs at 8, practice is at 9. Practice can consist of about usually no more than 2 hours, but it's rocking and rolling for 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer.
Hitting each other?
Yes, not really. I mean, you're hitting for sure, but you're not tackling. I would say out of those 25 camp practices, you may tackle. Depends who you are. The 1s probably will never tackle. The 2s and 3s will probably tackle. The 4s, if there is any, will definitely tackle.
So here we go. Kyle, you're giving me gold here because who's training in the offseason hitting? Who's tackling? First time you tackle is July 20th.
And that's why I think college, you're really better for the pros because you're doing up downs all the time and you have spring practice that's live, but it's not sustainable. And finances are everything. At the end of the day, your best players need to continue to play. You need to dumb things down and make sure your best players are healthy, because you need to win, and winning creates better culture, more money for everybody, fill up the seats, better stadiums, the owners are happy, and everybody gets paid. So it's the, chicken or the egg. Do you grind the guy hard so he's calloused, or you try to find the sweet spot, or you just do a bunch of walkthroughs like a lot of teams in the NFL do, because they just say, screw it. Our guys work out year round now. Guys are in shape year round. We don't need to beat the hell out of you and get you into shape. So long story short, it's really interesting stuff there. But again, it comes down to you just got to roll out there, and you just got to trust your footballness. We've made football now. It's like box jumps and, all this other stuff, because football, you can really train hard and it correlates right on the field. If you train hard, you run fast, you cut, and you lift, that makes you a better football player, period. It's non-negotiable. And then eventually your little boy football and you need to come out, and you got to play that too. So I think that's the where people get it twisted with these 40 times and all this stuff, all this math equation equals X. At the end of the day, a lot of my training is just lifting heavy, running fast. That's it, and it's worked out. It was worked out well for me. Okay.
You found that correlation. If you can find what correlates to high level performance, that's where you need to live. There's no question that we have a good understanding of a sports medicine community of what correlates to injury risk. It's not foolproof, and how well can you track that and then mitigate things around it? If I'm running a club, that's where I'm living. If you're running a club, how are you looking for that correlation? What's your ideal?
Well, I think time management of the whole thing, and that's what I'm going to go into next here, is changing the schedule. No, it's great. I think changing the schedule of the off season. It's really unique because there's this massive block of time. I think 5 weeks is a long period of time. From you have a break between, your end of off season training until the season. I always said, I think everyone should be back a week earlier and take a week off the OTAs and have everybody come in a week earlier, get everybody lifting, get everybody running, give some guys some days off, let the anxiety of training camp come together, because you pop into camp and you go right into practice. I think there's some anxiety with that for a lot of players, right? I think personally, physically, make sure your guys are healthy, get guys in the weight room for a week together, get them running, get them sprinting, get them jogging, get him moving. Individual drills, some 7-on-7 stuff, no hitting. And then that next Monday you start. So I'd have the guys come in if I don't think you can. I don't think the union allows you to do it. But that's what I would do personally. I think it gives, all right, so if maybe a guy wasn't training as much, okay, we can see how much he's training, or we could do all their testing and all their physicals then to see what type of shape they're in. And then, hey, listen, because at the end of the day, you're a player that needs to produce, but if you're one of the best players and you come out of shape, it doesn't really matter, because you need to play. You're paid that money. So they're going to find a way for you to set a plan to do it. So again, it's chicken or the egg. Does the player need to come in shape? Of course. But if he's not to the level they need you to, because you're going to play 65, 70 reps a game, I think, maybe that week before could help you evaluate better, instead of, hey, we're in some undisclosed location, or we're in Wofford, middle of nowhere, college, when I was down in North Carolina, and, you come in and you're right in the training camp, sleeping in a dorm room. So
good. Dude,
the schedule,
good. That's good.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would take a week off OTAs. I would get the guys, allow the guys to move in the week before, right? The weekend before, have them do a 4 to 5 day training session there, Monday to Friday, give the guys the weekend off, and then come back and start training camp that Monday. That's what I would do. I would maybe do the run test that Monday.
I'd say you're in the wrong field, but you're a hell of an athlete and you should be a football player, but this is your next field. That's good stuff. I hope your next employer is listening to that, dude.
We'll see, man. That's what I would do. And I've said it before to you, my other kind of, and I found out today, you're going to like this. UCLA is doing what I've always talked about. I didn't know this. There's a PT liaison, athletic trainer liaison in every position room. That's communicating on what they need. That's always been my kind of smoking gun, is if I ever have these meetings, this is what I think needs to happen. This is what I would need to have success in the position. Coaching is, I think there's a disconnect between coaches and trainers. It's hey, we'll coach you hard as shit. Now go see the trainer. Well, you tell me I can't bend. You tell me I can't make this turn. It's not because I don't want to make it. because of whatever. Either I'm physically limited at God's gifts, hey, I don't have them, or which I think the majority of the cases, if you're playing at a high level, you have them, but you're a little tight in the hip, which makes you tight in the hammy, which makes you boop, 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 boop. So long story short, I think there needs to be more communication. And I think, of course, a lot of programs say they do it, but that's one way to do it for sure.
It's good.
Yeah, I always want to hear your thoughts. You and I talk about this all the time. I digress. All right. I want to move along here, Yoni. And one of the main reasons why we have you on is to just break down some of these injuries briefly, talk about a few things.
Sure.
And one of the main injuries last year in all of football was Brock Purdy. Everybody knows it. Tommy John surgery. You know, he hurt.
Hold on.
Well, let me just go through it. You're right. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. So let me just paint the picture, and then you can tell me where I'm wrong. Brock Purdy, quarterback for the Niners. He tore his UCL on the NFC Championship game. We all know Christian McCaffrey ended up playing quarterback. It was a whole, nightmare situation. NFL rule changes around it as well. A note from Lynch, Shanahan, and Purdy are optimistic that the second-year quarterback will be ready for week 1 of the 2023 season. Yoni, what are your thoughts on all of it?
First of all, I love this because this is truly my passion, the baseball world, and it's amazing when the baseball world meets the football world because the UCL, called the Tommy John ligament, is standardly a baseball injury. Even though quarterbacks throw as much as baseball players, if not more, there's far less stress on the arm throwing a football than there is a baseball. So baseball guys blow this ligament all the time. Very often, and this is what happened with Purdy. He got hit, right, and put too much stress on ligament, and it blew up on him. So, but he didn't get Tommy John. He got a little bit different of a repair. So Tommy John, they'll pull a tendon usually from elsewhere, somewhere else in the body. Sometimes it's the wrist, sometimes it's the hamstring, and they'll use that to create the ligament that holds the elbow together on the inside of your elbow. That's the standard Tommy John procedure. That had been around since Tommy John, who was the pitcher in the 70s, first had that done. I think he was a pitcher with the Yankees, but a guy out in California came up with this idea that they were doing elsewhere in the body. He repaired that ligament, became the Tommy John procedure, and he went on to pitch equally as much after the procedure as he did before the procedure. They did that procedure for 40 years, the same surgery. Like pulling out a tendon, stringing it through the elbow, takes like a year. Rehab got a little bit better, so it started to get a little bit less than a year to come back. I think it took Tommy John 14 months or something to get back on a mound. And the rehab got better, and so that was the Tommy John surgery until the Godfather himself, James Andrews, is sitting in the OR, and he's like, we got to do better than this. And so long story short, they come up with a different procedure around 2013, and that's called an internal bracing. The ligament has to be torn a very specific way. It has to be pulled off the bone, but they go in, they bolt it back down, and then they put in kind of like struts around it that they're not pulling from anywhere else in the body, and that braces that ligament. It's called an internal brace, and holy cow, has that been successful. And so now you're starting to see pitchers that are able to undergo that get back a lot faster. Just to compare, a Tommy John procedure, you're not throwing a baseball or a football for about 5 months. Compared to the repair or the internal bracing, you're throwing at 3.5 months. So you're like a month and a half forward the whole time, to the point where you're pitching in games with Tommy John 12 to 13 months thereabouts. If you get the internal brace, you're at 7 to 8 months. I've seen it done in 6 months at elite levels. We're talking, I think they got University of Michigan baseball back at 6 months on the mound, competing, throwing freaking hard with an internal brace. That is what Purdy was hoping to have done. That is what Purdy woke up having had completed. They weren't sure which way it was going to go. And that's why I say the Niners really dodged a bullet. The fact that he was able to undergo this internal bracing, hopefully that was kind of like standardized enough for you. Much higher success rates. He's going to be back way faster. So than had he had the big boy done. I think he had surgery beginning of March, you said, right? So he's looking at about 5-6 months from there, which puts him about ready for beginning of the season.
Really,
a lot of words, dude.
I love it. It's great stuff. It's really going to be an interesting topic about how they handle the quarterback situation there. They have former top pick Trey Lance. They have former top pick Sam Darnold. They have one of the most, if not the most talented roster in the NFL. So how that plays out there and how quickly they get him back, we'll see. We'll see if they use him for week one, ready to rock and roll for a really good Niners team. Okay, Jimmy Garoppolo, former Niner, Raiders quarterback now. Garoppolo initially suffered a left foot injury December 6, 2022, while playing for the 49ers. San Fran feared that he suffered a Liz Frank fracture, which required surgery, but the 49ers doctors concluded that it was a different type of fracture that didn't require surgery and had a recovery timetable of 2 months. Well, that wasn't the case going on for Jimmy G when he got to the Raiders. So talk through what you know about this situation and what it's going to look like moving forward for Jimmy G and the Raiders.
I think this is a fascinating situation because it just goes to show you, you think when you look at an X-ray, you look at an MRI, it's just like looking at any type of image. It's clear. Either it's A or it's B. Not so. And this Jimmy G case is a great one, whereas you look at a given X-ray or imaging, one doctor might see one thing, another doctor sees another thing, and that can totally change your career, your timeline, etc. So once Jimmy G gets to the Raiders, they start looking and they're like, holy crap, dude, you did need this surgery. And so he underwent this surgery. And just to explain what a Liz Frank is, it can be devastating, but it's when the middle of your foot, the ligament gets torn apart and there's a broken bone in the middle of your foot, and it causes a tremendous amount of instability at the foot. Very painful, often can rob athletes of their power. And so standardly, these are fixed pretty rapidly, and they just put a few screws to hold those bones back together. Sometimes they'll stitch that ligament back together, hope that it heals, and then very oftentimes they go back in once it heals and pull those screws out. That's standard Liz Frank. Now, that takes 7 to 9 months to return to form. Super important to understand what is your position, right? Like all of these procedures, and that's why you hear the 4 to 6 or the 7 to 9 months. They're super variable because what is it you need the limb to do? Jimmy G, I'm sure dude's an athlete, but he's not Kyler. He's not Lamar. He's not running around. He doesn't need that same pop, speed, change of direction, which can be very difficult to get back after Liz Frank. He's more stationary. He also had a little bit different of a procedure. So he didn't have those screws placed in. He had a plate put on top that usually decreases the time to return. You're looking at about 6 months till he returns. So if he had that surgery done in March, which I think he did, right? That lines him up to be about ready to go to varying degrees. Just like a quick point there, it can take, he's back to competition 5 to 6 months. He's not feeling good for 8 to 9. He's not getting that explosiveness, that pop until 8 to 9. So just kind of be ready for that. Just thinking about holistically speaking, that athlete, the quarterback specifically, or a pitcher, the shoulder needs to work, the elbow needs to work, etc. But that foundation that comes all the way up from the way your foot hits the ground, it's got to be on point. Look to see how Jimmy tries to compensate for some of the difficulties he might have with that foot placement or confidence in that foot placement.
Yeah, it's really good stuff there about Jimmy G, a player that's been at the top of the world in the quarterback atmosphere, and then with these injuries, and he's with a new team and a new coach that he was with the Patriots and Coach McDaniel. So lots to unpack there in Raiderland. Austin Corbett, I think he's one of the best guards in the NFL. One of the better offensive linemen I've ever had the opportunity to play with. It was a shame due to my injuries last year. I really wasn't able to play with him, but I watched him play in Carolina, and I saw this injury, and it was devastating. It was January 10th. Let's see when this happened. I think it was, he tore his ACL on the 8th of January, and we were in New Orleans, and it was the second quarter and 27 seconds left. And he's chasing down an interception, and he just dropped. And he tore his ACL. And after a great year in Carolina, signed a big money deal over from the Rams, and just did a tremendous job for us down there in Carolina. But tore his ACL in early January, Yoni. I know they'd like to get him back for week 1. That's no secret. It's all over the internet. What are your thoughts on having a big boy, 300-pounder, big-time squatter too, dude? Like, this guy can lift a house, coming back for week 1.
He can do this. I wouldn't say this. You're going to ask me about Kyler, I bet, moving forward. He can do this because, he lives in a phone booth. He might be pulling a little bit, but he's not out there juking planting and going, I would feel far more comfortable with him doing it than a receiver or a DB or, a super mobile quarterback. So he can do it. It's interesting to think about the way these surgeries are repaired. And so just talking about, it's actually different the way they repair this surgery than in most other outfits. Like if you're a prep schooler, let's say you're in high school and you tear your ACL, you're in college, you tear your ACL. A lot of times they're doing the ACL repair. And then depending upon if there's a meniscus, which is the shock absorber in the knee, if there's a tear there, maybe they repair it. But now they're adding like a seat belt, a safety belt on the outside of this knee. It's called your ALL or an LET. It's a ligament that prevents the knee from rotating aggressively. You get that addition to the surgery if you're in high school and college and you're going to a cutting edge surgeon. You're not getting it if you're in the NFL, which is crazy. And it just speaks to some of the politics at play, I think, personally, which is we don't want to be the first guy to do a new type of intervention, but it actually makes the ACL far more stable to add that little bit of ligament on the outside or tendon, depending upon where it's grafted from. Like I said, it just prevents that rotation. But to kind of sum that up is if you don't have to cut the way these elite level guys necessarily do, or the skill positions, I think 9 months is a nice timetable. Not to say you're not getting back there. Like Kyler will probably be back in the 9 months, and I know we're going to get there, but he's going to look a lot different for those first few months back.
Yeah, it's a great point about Corbett in the phone booth. He's bracing, he's planting, he's trying to stop force or drive force out of there against another human being. There's a lot of volume for those guys. You're not really rotating guys through either. So there's no real pitch count here when it comes to the offensive line play. Maybe a receiver who's getting his way back. Hey, we're going to give you 15 plays this week, 20 plays next week, and then you're good to go. Kyler Murray, you brought him up a few times. He tore his ACL, mid-December last year. He got surgery right in the beginning of January towards the end of the season. Tore his ACL December 12th against the Patriots and had surgery repaired January 3rd, like I said. So what are you thinking? 9 months again for Kyler, week one?
So I do think he's 9 months. I think we talk about trying to add value in some of the specificity that we pontificate about here, right? And so I think it's important to tell the audience, the millions of people listening to the Colin Thompson show, not every ACL is the same. The press, the media, let's say, will say towards ACL, so 9 months. Sometimes that ACL tear comes with other ligament damage. Sometimes it comes with a meniscus tear. Sometimes they're non-weight bearing for 6 weeks following. Sometimes they're weight bearing right away. So no two ACLs are the same. So those expectations should be nuanced and kind of delved into and better understood. Obviously, that's why we're here. So if he's a straight ACL, 9 months, top of his game, an athlete like Kyler. If there's a meniscus involvement and he's non-weight bearing for a long time, 6 weeks, that can slow the process and just tempers the expectations. It might even just say, hey, we're not going to send him on this boot or something. We're not going to design a run for him because he's not ready yet. Week 6, now we're designing a run for him. It might actually take hold like that, but you're never getting that full story because no two ACLs or really injuries and surgeries necessarily the same. It's worth cutting up what that rehab looks like. And it's really interesting the way different positions go about this rehab as it pertains to the organization. I have seen a tremendous amount of elite level guys like the Lamars of the world. That guy tears an ACL. He has the undivided attention of every single person in that building. They are not letting him find a schmuck like me on the outside. There's no way in hell he's rehabbing out there. We're going to try to do everything in-house. You get a guy who's trying to make the roster, you better believe that that guy's not getting the same amount of attention. Same injury, same surgery, totally different amount of attention in rehab. He's getting the lesser AT, right? Or the less experienced AT. Maybe the PT's working, maybe not. Totally different. Those are the guys that say, wait a minute, how do I find someone on the outside? How do I bolster my team? We hope that happens, but it's a totally different 9-month life. Those rehabs very often, not always, but very often look totally different based upon you were drafted, how much money you're making, how important you are, etc.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong, Kyle. You've been inside.
You're not wrong. And it's not a shot at the business either. It's not a shot at the athletic trainers. It's not a shot at the PTs. It's just normal business practice.
True.
Right? Like it's just basic business. Who is a commodity X, the PT who gets paid the most, you work with the person that gets paid the most, right? Like it's pretty straightforward. It's not emotional. If you remove emotion from football world, yes, running backs aren't getting paid. Yes, sometimes you don't get as much treatment as the lower roster guy as a higher roster guy. That's how it goes in life, right? Like more successful people are on TV, more successful people make more money, right? Whatever that may be, it's just kind of reality of life there. I don't know how to draw any more comparisons, but it's a great point you bring up. So Hendon Hooker, Detroit Lions quarterback, this guy was an absolute stud at Tennessee, and when he got drafted a lot higher, but he got hurt. Let's see, he tore his ACL, I believe. Sorry, I'm losing track of my notes here. He was injured mid-November, and right now he said, I'm 7 months out, just really stacking days. Hooker said, I just got back from LA working with Jordan Palmer and my rehab team, Modus. They're really dialing into the little things to help my guy to get back, to get stronger and get me better. Usually it's 9 to 10 months, depending on the degree of injury and surgery. Yeah, so it's an ACL. I'm feeling better every single day. Whenever I get out there, move around, throw the ball, I'm ecstatic. I can't do much too fast. So what do you think? Thoughts on a guy who's given kind of a redshirt year in the NFL? And we all know it's 9 to 10 months. But my question for you is, and I'm sorry we have a little lag here, so that's why Yoni and I are talking over each other a little bit, but it's all good, is, okay, what's his year look like? Like, no, we get it. He's going to be on the practice. He's going to be on the roster, but he's going to be, maybe throwing. He's going to be getting involved, but he has a lot of extra time now. Like, can you take your time with a few things, or you still have to grind and get better? How's that work?
So I love being able to kind of read between the lines here. Like the quote you just read, talking about Jordan Palmer, talking about his rehab team with Modus guys. I'll tell you what that is in a second. But he's got his team outside, right? He's working with a quarterback outside. Modus is a sports science company. He's working with them. Here's why I love that, because they are, without a doubt, looking at him as an entire athlete, right? Looking at the way he rotates his hips, the way it delivers his hands and shoulder all the way through the zone. They're working on things that are super specific, as well as, I'm sure, the bread and butter of, hey, does the knee work? Does it flex? Does it extend? Do the muscles contract? And so he is someone, just having read that little bit and giving us that 9-10 month window, I think he's going to be ready to roll quickly. The question is, how well is he managed over that season? He's not going to be asked to take snaps most likely right away. I think that bodes really well for the longevity of this thing. Too often, you'll see guys have to rush back or push to be back, and they're going to pay for it long term. And so that's what I'm reading between the lines of some of the nuance to say this guy's taking it seriously. He's got his own team. He's using the best that is available to him, and he's using position-specific guys that really bodes well.
It's interesting. And my question for you, though, is when he gets back in the building, what's that going to look like?
Yep.
Now, I know I'm not talking about the communication on that. I'm talking about, now there's a lot, I should have done the research here, but he may go on a physically unable to perform list. So he may not be able to even practice. I don't know those details. If he's on the roster, can he be on the practice? I don't think he can. My gut is he can't practice or do anything. So it's really a true redshirt year, really tough one there. He can't even do much. So what's that rehab look like? Do you just start doing normal football drills with them and just say, hey, you're cleared for activity and you're just doing indie a couple days a week? Like, how do you do that?
That's super dependent upon the organization. Like, I've seen organizations, NFL organizations, that say, hey, you're clear. You might not be able to play now, but you're done with the rehab. So don't spend time with the PTs, spend as much time with the position coach, which obviously I'm biased, but I think that's a massive mistake. I've seen guys take it the other way. By the way, I've seen organizations take it the other way, saying, I know you're cleared to return. I want you with the PT every day. He's in charge of your correctives, making sure this never happens again. I want you with the strength guy. We're trying to make gains. We're trying to make sure you're better. I want you with the coaches, even though you're not playing. I want you spending time with them, right? I've also seen the players take it that freaking seriously. Dude, I have guys on active NFL rosters that will use their workers' comp for a given injury that they are totally cleared from. As long as that case is open, they are using it to constantly try to get better. So, okay, yeah, I know I hurt my shoulder, but I got to make sure this hip is functioning. Let me get on your schedule 5 times a week, 6 times a week. Make sure that hip is okay. This is so just continuing to optimize and perfect human movement. So much of it is organization dependent. So much of it is player dependent. This
Really
guy
good
sounds like
stuff.
a grinder. I bet you he's in there. Working hard.
Yeah, it's interesting thing too. Like, what's his projection there in Detroit? Going to sit this year? They're a team trending in the right direction. Jared Goff, I'm guessing, has 2 to 3 years left on his deal. So, it could be a situation where he's sitting around for 1, 2, 3 years and he's learning under a great quarterback. It's severely underrated in Jared Goff, top pick. Had success, went to a Super Bowl with the Rams, having success with Detroit. So something to keep an eye on there, and it seems like a great draft pick and a great guy. No better person to learn to, than Jared. So, okay, buddy of mine, good friend. I had to throw Brian on here because I think Brian's a key piece for a team that we don't know what they're going to be this year. I think they're going to be a good team, Minnesota Vikings. Brian O'Neill, right tackle from the state of Delaware, went to the University of Pittsburgh as a tight end, moved to tackle. He's big. He's lean, though, as an offensive lineman. Yoni, for your knowledge here, this guy looks like a basketball player playing offensive line, but he's all 300 pounds. And he quoted the other day with a partially torn Achilles. Since the diagnosis, there's been no surprises. From the morning we took the MRI, which was the morning of, I think, week 16 or 17, he was chasing out an interception and he partially tore his Achilles. Looks like a sniper got him. He just popped up off the ground. And he said, there's been no surprises. They've done a really good job diagnosing what it is, how to treat it, finding out what it is, and then the steps are going to get me back to full strength. I've taken an approach of let's get this thing right. Let's do it the right each step of the way. There'll be enough time in terms of 2, 3, 4 weeks of when I come back. I'm not really getting into all that right now. That's on the trainers. It's more of what stage are we right now? Where are we doing this? Are we doing this the right way? And so far we have. Every step has been really good, really smooth, and I'm happy where I'm at. So partially torn Achilles. I talked to him. He said he's feeling freaking great. What does that look like, though? He got a surgery. What's the difference between obviously a partial tear and a major tear? Because you hear Achilles, man, and everyone's just skin crawls a little bit and starts to sweat. At least I do, because that could be a career ender.
Yeah, and it can be a career ender, specifically at this position because of the way you backpedal, right? Because of the way you explode out of that, and then you have to receive and anchor that force coming straight at you, and so much of that goes through your Achilles. That's why a couple organizations I saw last year had these on O linemen, had these Achilles repaired, and then popped it a couple games back. I think you got to be very position specific with this. So there's something called eccentric force. And so eccentric is when the muscle elongates as it controls the force going through it. So picture like a bicep negative, slowly lowering the weight. Well, as you're stepping back and getting banged in the chest, right, by a 300-pounder coming straight at you, that foot walks back, toe hits, heel then has to slowly lower. So the calf eccentrically expands, tries to control, and a tremendous amount of force goes through that Achilles tendon with that step. That's why these guys have trouble kind of coming back from it. They then have to plant that heel and drive forward as hard as they can. That's why they keep popping. The reason I kind of spell that out is because that's what his rehab needs to look like. It has to be super position specific there. It's very hard to get your pop all the way back. He's lucky that it was partial. And so what that allows the brain to do, because it wasn't totally severed from the bone, the brain is better able to communicate with the muscle because it didn't come all the way off. But those therapists have to be all over, and the athlete has to be all over. How do we get that brain to talk to the muscle, the calf muscle, and how do we get that tendon robust enough to handle that force eccentrically? So it's got to be super position specific in order to allow that to happen. Quick story. I saw, I think 3 guys last year, Achilles tendon rupture, subsequent repairs, NFL players. And I didn't get to them until late because, again, the organizations try to keep them in-house until they realize something's up, and then the players go and follow it elsewhere, who looked like absolute trash. I mean, you're talking 5, 6, 7 months out and can't do a heel raise. Meanwhile, they're looking at the timeline. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm getting close. I'm like, dude, you can't lift your heel off the ground. Or when the heel's down, you can't push your knee forward to get to what's called a positive shin angle, which is like the most athletic position ever. Like, you have to be there. They don't budge. Like, what the F have you been doing in rehab? By the way, NFL stars, NFL third contract guys, like guys who stuck around whose Achilles rehab did not go well. You better believe they were told it was going well. Didn't go well. Had a lot to kind of gain. So you never know when the player's like, "Yep, it's going well."
Yeah. Now, listen, that's the harsh part about the league, folks, is and again, it's don't hate the player, hate the game. It's a tough thing. It's a whole from the top down. It's really tough. You could be cut at any moment. You could lose your job at any moment. You could, get hurt. It's a lot to swallow. And we'll talk about it more when my career's over, and I'll get into all that a little bit more because, man, oh, man, there is a lot to unpack. And that's why I love Yoni on, because he's going into it for me. Okay, so I digress. Not wishing nothing but Brian and all these guys, nothing but success. Von Miller, one of the most athletic freaks, great player in the NFL. He tore his ACL in November. And he said, the most important thing for me is just to be available when the team needs me. If that's week 1, then I'll be happy for that. If that's week 6, then I'll be happy with that. But I guarantee it won't be any later than that. Whatever it takes for me to get to that point, that's what I'll do. So an interesting quote from a veteran who's done it at the highest level. And, they're saying he's going to be ready for week 1. He's going to be good to go. But interesting, does the team need me? I mean, that's a whole nother player personnel department. We don't need that. But It looks like Von Miller is on track and to gain a lot of his explosion back. When you're such a gifted player like that, I don't think you'll lose much.
I don't know, Kyle. I think you're right about that. The more explosive you are going in, the stronger you are. And obviously this guy's a brick, the better you are coming out, right? Like that's a part of the Adrian Peterson lore is the guy's not normal. So yeah, he comes back in a not normal timetable. Von Miller has those attributes, but 2 things here. 1, it sounds like he's hedging, doesn't it? It sounds like he's like, yeah, they want me back for week 1. I'll be back when they need me. That's kind of what I heard. And then I also know, dude's 34. It's different. 34 and 24 are different. Very specifically with pop and with recovery rates. And you see this in multiple sports. So he's a guy listen, you got to play every game, but I could see him taking a little bit longer than that 9 months. 34 years old. It's different.
And if you're the Bills, right? The big games are coming. You need to win early, of course. You open up with the Jets. Right. But you need to win in November and December. You could be trash. You could be average in the first 2 months of the season. Really, you can be. But if you just, win a third of your games down the stretch, you're right in the thick of it. And they're important games and usually divisional games, conference games. So we'll see what they do with Von. They have a lot of depth. They have a great roster. They draft well. So there'll be people behind him and he'll step in when he's ready and be ready to go. Some player that, one player that I just admire the hell out of, and I think he's one of the best players in the NFL right now, and he'll go down as one of the best tackles in NFL history. And that's Lane Johnson, the Eagles' right tackle. Signed a new deal. 32-year-old. He played through injuries during the Super Bowl appearance this past year. Dealt with a groin injury and torn abductor muscle. Despite those injuries, Johnson kept his streak alive, not allowing a sack. Excuse me, I can't read tonight. Something that he hasn't done since 2020. That's ridiculous. And he hasn't allowed as much as a quarterback hit since 2021. So Eagle star Lane Johnson underwent the surgery for a torn adductor today. This is from a while ago. Doc Bill Myers did it in Philly. 10 to 12 week recovery. Johnson impressed in playoffs despite the injury. So he'll be back, but talk about just the groin deal. How did he play through it? What were some things they were doing? And then how is he able to respond and get back to that all-pro level?
This is a great case. I'm glad we're hitting the Lane Johnson case because number one, they say the best place to have a heart attack is in a hospital. The best place to have a groin injury and surgery is in Philly because Dr. Myers invented this world. And so it's the adductor, which is the muscle that's on the inside. It becomes your groin. It also goes all the way down below your knee. So it spans that entire inside of the thigh. And you got this tug of war going on between that muscle and then your oblique and core muscles, your abdominal muscles on the other side of your pelvis, and they're kind of attached to the pelvis, and they work in tandem, they work symbiotically, they work synergistically as well as antagonistically, which means they help each other, and then the reverse side fights each other to cause stability, right? And so it's very impressive that he was able to fight through and not get it repaired. When you say you had an adductor surgery, that could mean a host of things. And Dr. Myers will tell you there's a million ways to kind of go about it. So a lot of times he will cut a piece of that muscle that attaches into your groin and just kind of release that tissue so it stops tugging and irritated. Sometimes he will take the tissue and bolt it back down and repair it. Sometimes he'll do that to the adductor, the groin muscle, and he'll do it also to the abdominals, go in and suture them back to the top of your pelvis bone so that they can be reinforced. None of that is clear as to which way he went during this surgery. Invariably, in classic Dr. Myers fashion, he says it'll be 10 to 12 weeks before he's back. And I've spoken to Dr. Myers about this. It's kind of fascinating how nonchalant he is about throwing that timetable back. It's a very short timetable. I have seen dudes get up off that table and they are cured quick, like 6 weeks, running routes, competing at an NFL level. I've seen dudes that are back and playing 10 to 12 weeks because their job depends on it. And you're talking about months, 6 months before they're like, hey, I'm happy I had that surgery. So super variable. And the reason it's variable is because it's variable what he does in there. Sometimes it's massive trauma. Sometimes it's a little bit of snipping and releasing. So it's kind of all over the map. Lane Johnson's ability to get his core where it needs to be, his ability to fight through pain, because these can be very painful, is definitely evident, having gone through what he went through before he got that surgery. Also, those guys do make it back. Return to previous level of function and competition is very high coming out of this surgery. And like I said, Myers is like the best in the country at doing it because he created it. So I think he'll be okay. Philly fans can chill.
It's always funny because I should say this. I've heard some great stories over the years of guys that have got groin surgeries there, and then who's sitting next to them. You know, like Temple football players. Temple football players sitting there, and it's like Dame Lillard and J.J. Watt. You're like, oh, okay. And then this guy's there, that guy's there because he's the man, right? Some people go to Andrews for this, Anderson for ankle and foot. He's the king of that. We'll finish up. Javonte Williams, Denver's running back. He had a rough injury last year. Williams' injury is one of the worst any athlete could get, and certainly at running back. Last year, October 2nd, he tore his ACL. That's what I'm going to say. He tore his LCL and his PCL. Mile High Sports Segers summed it up best at this time. It feels impossible to forecast now when he'll return. Fast forward 6 months later, April 20, 2023, when Denver Gazette, can't say his last name. That's ridiculously long. The GM, blah, blah, blah. We move it forward. Be coming from I'm just moving along because it's just good banter. I want to kind of paint the picture for the folks, but his timetable remains in limbo. But he did confirm that Williams would return at some point during the upcoming season. So the synopsis, me who cannot read. Yeah. The point is he tore his ACL, he tore his PCL, he tore his LCL. He's a stud running back. That position is brutal on players, and they're hoping he can return this season. What do you say, Yoni?
He's not going to look the same. He comes back this year. He's not going to look the same. I'm working with some athletes that are going through this. It is a massive surgery. It's like a bomb went off in your knee. Because so much is repaired, there's a tremendous amount of scar tissue. Very often, it takes more than one surgery to get this athlete back on the field because they'll have to go in and clean up the scar tissue to get all of that motion back. And then you have to layer on top of that strength. So this guy, massive uphill battle. Not to say it can't be done, but you better believe it's going to be towards the back end of the season. And there's a higher likelihood he doesn't look the same.
Man, that hits differently when you say that. I for his career, I hope he takes the year. Now, you may not have a job, right? You may not have a job. That's the other part is like, got to go. That's a part of the effort. That's a part of the effort. I don't like to say it, but that's part of the, screw it. Got to go do it. I'm going. I'm practicing. I don't care.
And
because I don't want to lose my job.
And I've seen, exactly. You're exactly right. And I've seen guys kind of handle this differently. Some guys like get so wrapped up around, I got to be 100% before I walk back on that field. Well, maybe they give him, he's 23. Maybe they give him till he's 24 years old, but you better believe they're starting to draft as soon as he hits 24, looking for his replacement. So I've seen guys masterfully navigate these waters where they will show the team enough to say, okay, he's going to be okay. Let's keep him around. Let's continue to invest in him. But you got to be careful that you don't get back on the field and look like trash, because you get back on the field, look like trash. Now stuff's stacked against you. So what's the agent doing? What's this guy's true feel for where he fits in the league? I think there's so many factors at play there to delve into that could play a role in when you actually see him on the field.
I hope he comes back. I hope he's a huge part of their offense there. I think they're going to do a great job running the ball this year. I like Denver this year. I really do.
Do they have any fullbacks? They have any fullbacks on that roster?
Oh my God!
What? It's a legit question.
Mike Burton. I wish I could just put him in right now, baby. Ever heard of him? 5'4", 250. Your local fire hydrant, Michael Burton.
Give that guy the ball. Give him the ball. Give Burton the ball.
Thing is, Mike was a great running back. Most fullbacks are like fullback. Mike was a great running back. Go watch Mike Burton's highlight film in high school. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I couldn't even have Mike on here right now. I do my lat pull downs and do my calf raises, and I'm ready.
Get him on. He's ready. He's ready.
Oh my God! What are we going to talk about? You can't even acknowledge the fact that he plays for the Denver Broncos. Mike, you play for the Broncos. You can Google it. So I digress. The great Mike Burton, guy's unbelievable. Expect a lot more for this Yoni guys throughout the year. This was a larger episode because we want to talk about some of the bigger injuries this offseason. We missed some guys, of course, and we're going to come up with some, different stuff, but we're going to plug and play Yoni into my weekly show every week. So it may be nothing from him. Everyone's healthy, which will not happen. But I'm going to, take a minute from Yoni, 2 minutes from Yoni, 5 minutes from Yoni every week. And he's just going to kind of briefly talk about the injury, when they're going to return, their process, a little bit of what it looks like, some tidbits like you got here. No, it's good stuff, Yoni. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Dude, I love this, Kyle. Thanks for having me, man. Anytime.